Hey, welcome back to another Haven't Read It video. Today's first story from r/MaliciousCompliance. Don't want to pay 4 guys to not work for 6 hours? Okay, you can pay 30 guys to not work for 6 hours. To make an already long story as short as possible, some background. I'm a manager for a North American railroad, and a lot of our work involves different crafts of employees. Different crafts have different unions and different work rules. The managers of the other crafts and I work well together to get done what we need to get done, especially when some of the work needs to get done at night. The track guys can have a crew assigned to nights, while the signal guys can't. Even better, the signal guys who work overnight have to be let go after 12 hours. And if it's now the regular shift because they came in last night, they get paid the rest of the day to go home and sleep. Track guys have all 3 shifts, but we only have a day shift and an evening shift, but no night shift, because the big hats don't want to hire enough people to do it. Now, the company has decided that paying guys to go home 2 hours early on a Thursday, come in and work overtime all night at 10 p.m., and go home at 10 a.m., getting another 4 hours to go home and sleep, is the ending of all that is good and pure in the universe, and will eventually lead to the collapse of capitalism, the nation, and indeed the universe itself. So they decide that the second shift guys have to stay 4 extra hours, and the first shift guys have to come in 4 hours early. I point out that, 1, I can't force employees to work overtime unless it's an emergency, and a union isn't likely to agree that we want to do this at night so we don't affect traffic is an emergency. 2, not all employees are qualified on the same things. 3, since they took half of my trucks away 5 years ago, because savings, I don't have enough vehicles for an entire second crew to show up at 2 a.m. and relieve the guys working in the field so they can go home. The guys currently working will have to stop work, pack up the tools, drive back to the office, let the smaller relief crew load up, drive back out to the work site, do the starting paperwork and briefings, and begin the work. And most importantly, number 4, that while we aren't there, the track guys can't work because we have to keep taking things off of the rail so the track guys can do their work and then put them back when the guys are done so we can run the trains in the morning. All of it falls on deaf ears because the freckle-faced college kid who opened every conversation with, "I have an MBA, damn it," who has somehow gotten into a position where he's in charge of estimates, wants to complain about those 24 hours a night. So after having gone on the meeting record for all of it, I get out of the kid's way. I decide that if my boss isn't going to have my back, I'm not going to stop this inevitable disaster. After all, I have only been doing this for 27 years, but he graduated with a 3.6 GPA from UTEP, so he must know better. So the first night, the job grinds to a halt like clockwork at 1 a.m. The second crew shows up at about 4:15 and they get to work. The track folks pack it in because by the time anything gets dismantled, there won't be enough time to get anything done and put it all back together and start moving trains by 7. Second night, the shift change was a little smoother, so they got out there at 3:45. Managed to get a little work done before packing up. Third and fourth night, it rained really hard, so the drive back to the shop and out to the job site took extra time. No work done after the new crew showed up at 4:30. Bright and early Monday morning, we show up at our morning meeting to find the track guys got about 30% of the work done that they'd planned for the week, and at this pace finish a 6-week job more than 15 weeks behind and over budget by more than 300%. Mr. MBA proceeds to launch into his carefully rehearsed speech about key metrics, percent spend versus percent complete, and all sorts of other nonsense. Then he decides to start in on me, since I obviously conspired and colluded with my employees to egregiously erode progress for an entire week. I held up the meeting minutes from the previous week, told him in no uncertain terms that he had asked, in fact demanded, that we have a full shift change in the middle of the track department's work. I looked across the table at him and asked him if he wanted to revise that position. Completely unwilling to let this lowly engineer tell him what to do, he said no, and I was supposed to somehow magically make the shift change faster. Next 3 weeks were the same story. They've now been out there for a month and have managed to accomplish just shy of a week and a half of work. Mr. MBA shows up on the site one night, just in time to watch my night guys walk off, watch the track guys shut down the machines and gather outside to smoke, hang out, and generally carouse, because they know they now have 3 hours to screw off and be paid for it. My guys had called me when Mr. MBA showed up. I get out of bed and get to the job site just in time to see this guy in his shiny, fresh from the package safety gear screaming at the top of his lungs to the guys to get back in their equipment and get the naughty back to work. They all refuse because they all know that they can't work without us there. Not that they care all that much about our equipment, but because they know Mr. MBA has been throwing a little too much weight around. And nothing makes union employees stick together better or faster than putting the screws to a manager who really needs it. I walk up during a profanity-laced tirade and cut right in and say, well, Mr. MBA, I'm sure you're not suggesting that these qualified employees violate Rule XXX, which clearly states that they shall not, under any circumstance, run that equipment through a switch that the signal department hasn't checked, would you? That would be a serious violation and could get him a 30-day suspension without pay. And if you were to suggest that he do that, you wouldn't have a union card in your pocket. And he would have 30 witnesses that saw you give him that directive. So you wouldn't be suggesting that, would you? He turned 3 shades of purple, stomped back to his little white company sedan and drove away. He held on to this asinine mid-shift shift change for another 2 weeks until he couldn't hide the massive production delays from his boss anymore. And suddenly he wasn't in charge of the estimates anymore. The total cost of his little venture? Just over $940,000 over the course of 6 weeks. But he did manage to save $700 a night on those off hours that he didn't have to pay for. Top comment says, the definition of penny wise and pound foolish. We see this in healthcare routinely. Boeing is finding out the hard way what happens when you let bean counters take over highly technical and specialized industries. Second top comment, I've had a distinct pleasure of meeting 3 people in the last year that held high level of qualifications and are complete idiots. Suppose it's the danger of teaching just the books and expecting people to suddenly work out it's a mix of books in boots. And I really hope someone sent them a framed pie chart showing money saved versus money set on fire. Third top comment, sounds like he has earned a nickname, $1 Million Man or maybe millionaire. Someone responds, perfect use for $1 Million Baby. Next top comment says, this entire situation describes exactly why the rail system in the US is a fraction of what it once was. Next top comment, lovely. Unfortunately, the only lesson learned from this was likely, unions bad. Keeps perfect plan from working. That is true. Next story, you said every purchase. I work in road construction and our PMs made a policy that every company card purchase needs to go through them to get purchase order number before buying so they could track purchases per job. So the next day the project managers were getting multiple calls at 5 a.m. from employees getting water and ice for the job site asking for approval. Now we are able to buy stuff and get the purchase order number afterwards, lol. Next story from r/anti-work. Work doesn't accept doctor's notes. I recently got a UV burn on my cornea, brought a doctor's note to my work, and I get a text message the next day telling me that my job won't take doctor's notes. Is that shot even legal? Top comment says, ask them if they'll accept a note from your lawyer. Sounds like a workplace accident waiting to happen, you know? Next top comment says, what would they like in place of a doctor's note? Just deny people ever get sick or injured? Someone responds, welcome to America. We have no workers' rights in 99% of the country. Our next story, Tales from Tech Support, HR and fire detectors. The IT department, actually they called it MIS way back then, was on the lower/ground level. The floor plan was offices, hallway, my office with glass wall, IT bullpen, my guys, another glass wall, computer room, another glass wall, hallway, more offices. So from my desk, I could see all the way through to the other side of the building. You can get into the computer room from either end if you had a card to swipe at the door. Nobody other than IT had those cards, or so I thought. Sitting there mid-morning one day, pounding away on my keyboard and some movement caught my eye. Looking through the window, across the bullpen, and through the computer room, I see HR manager and some guy carrying what looks like a leaf blower. I'm rather PO'd the HR had a card I didn't know about and just walked in there. They were looking at the ceiling and the guy raised the leaf blower and, oh crap, there's a smoke wand and the idiots are checking the detectors. I vaulted over my desk, ran through the bullpen and into the computer room just in time to hear a IBM 4361 mainframe, AS400B50, Spark file server, Novel file server, ROLM phone switch, and 3 TI muxes for data/voice to the remote plants, all winding down to dead silence. We didn't have a halon system in there, thank the powers, but the smoke detectors killed the big UPS and all power in the room. The HR guy and the other just stood there, eyes wide, mouths open, with the patented, what just happened look. And with the glass walls, a bunch of other department managers who came to see what happened stood there and greatly enjoyed watching me jump up and down, ranting and raving at those two. Top comment says, oh my, at least you had witnesses for who the witless parties were. Any gear lost? OP says, as I remember we had to do a couple restarts, brought a couple of machines back up in panic mode, did a clean shutdown, then a clean restart. I believe we just lost some work in progress. No hardware issues. Second top comment says, was his card revoked? That's the real question, because it could have happened again. To be fair, HR is not hired to be technical, so kind of makes sense you wouldn't ask about the smoke detectors before going to check that they were working. I think somebody failed HR. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day. See you in the next one.